Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for coming. My name is Pat Cuviello, and I'm with Humanity Through Education, and welcome to the 5th Annual National Animal Rights Day. On this day, yes, feel free to applaud. On this day, once a year, we stop everything else and give our full attention to the most marginalized, most abused, and most oppressed group on this planet, other animals. On this day, we remember them, we lament their pain and mourn their loss. We give them a voice through ours and reach out on their behalf to anyone who has a heart to hear. National Animal Rights Day is being held in 5 other cities across the U.S. and Canada, and 2 next week. People often say, if only animals could talk. But you and I know that that desire is misplaced, because we know that other animals talk, and they talk all the time. They speak with voices, and they speak with their bodies. They try to get away from people when they're treating them cruelly. They scream when they're in pain. They wag their tails, they lick our faces, they purr when they're happy. Their barks, their chirps, their meows, their trumpets are all clear vocal expressions of their thoughts and emotions. Clear communications with meaning. They are always expressing themselves. In fact, their voices are so loud it is the very reason we are here today. Because we have all heard their cries. Not only have we heard their cries, we feel their cries. Coming from every farm, from every slaughterhouse, from every meat market, from every testing lab, from every breeding factory, from every fishing pond, from every hunting ground, from every circus, from every zoo, from every religious temple, pet store, city shelter, restaurant, and dinner table in every home in America. Animals are individuals who, like us, have a unique personality. They desire to avoid pain and suffering, and they have a will to live. They come in all shapes, all colors and sizes. Some have fur, some have feathers, some have scales, some have fins, some have paws, some have tiny little legs. But they all share the very same thing that we all have in common. They want to live. And they want to live with their loved ones, and they want to be happy, and they want to be free. So when people tell me, if only animals could talk, I say, if only people would listen when they talk, the world would be a different place. People often also ask, thank you. People often also ask, how do you know what animals think and feel? And I respond, because I'm an animal, just like you, we're all animals. And all animals have certain characteristics that they share. We feel love, we feel anger, we feel pain, we feel sadness. We are living, breathing beings, and we were created by the same earth, and we all share the same earth. We all want to experience kindness, compassion, dignity, and the most cherished power of all, we all want freedom. And no animal wants to be treated like property. Property is like this cement thing over here. So to treat an animal like property, you have to deny that that animal is an animal, that that animal does not feel pain, that that animal does not have thoughts, that that animal has no emotions, unlike that monument there. Other animals are not a means to our end. They are ends unto themselves. Their freedom is beautiful, and their enslavement is a tragedy. The bedrock principle of animal rights is that all living beings have a right to live their lives free from exploitation, victimization, and cruelty. This is a right that every being has, and as humans we need to respect. But how do we acknowledge this right when it comes to non-human animals? Every 30 minutes, 6 million animals are killed in slaughterhouses around the world. In the United States alone, 10 billion land animals and 20 billion sea animals are killed for food every year. Additionally, 10 million animals are killed in laboratories, and 3 million are killed for their skin and fur. And it is also estimated that another 200 million are killed by hunters. That's 80 million a day. It's a slaughter on a scale so massive that is unequal in human history. The sheer magnitude of this well-oiled systems we have developed to raise, kill, and use with the most unimaginable cruelty billions of living beings just so we can selfishly satisfy our taste buds, or satisfy our vanity with a fur jacket or a leather shoe, or wash our hair with some brand name shampoo is unfathomable. And it's going on every day, every hour, every moment. In fact, it's going on right now as we stand here to commemorate those who are suffering because it's going on. And this is why we are here today, folks, because this has to stop. And it will only stop if you and I choose to stop it, to speak up and to stop it. We need to imagine a day when other animals can live on their own terms, with their families, happy and free. We need to imagine a day when we as humans will respect the rights of other beings on this planet. We need to imagine a day when humanity acts responsibly and protects all animals and the earth instead of harming and destroying them. We need to imagine a day when all humans will open their hearts to compassion. Because if we can imagine that day, then we can create that day. This is our planet, but it's theirs too. And we need to act accordingly, and we need to share it. But we are not just here today to commemorate the deaths and suffering of billions of animals. We are also here to inspire people so that they will take action, so that we won't have to gather like this every year to commemorate the death and suffering of billions of animals. There's an ancient Chinese proverb that states, if you are thinking a year ahead, sow a field. If you are thinking 10 years ahead, plant a tree. But if you're thinking 100 years ahead, educate the people. And what this means is society doesn't change overnight. It takes time to change society. It takes educating people. None of us changed overnight. We changed because somebody talked to us, because we saw something, because we read something. Education. Unfortunately, education takes time. But fortunately, we are beyond the overnight stage. Our movement has 30 to 40 years of momentum behind it already. And I can tell you from experience that that momentum is the product of education. And that education has resulted in many successes. My own personal success story began about 28 years ago, at a time when there was very little interest from the animal rights movement to advocate for animals used by circuses. I was coming home on a bus one day from work, and I saw a poster for Circus Vargas on a pole at Town and Country Village in San Jose. So I stopped. I got off the bus at Town and Country Village, which is now Santana Row, and I walked over there to look at the animals. I had heard about circuses. I'd read accounts, but I had never really seen a circus prior to that. So I walked over there, and at this time, because there weren't a lot of protests against circuses, they weren't trying to hide the treatment of the animals. So anyone could walk right up and see how they treated the animals. So I walked up, and the first thing I saw was some goats in a small pen. And their hooves had grown so far out, they were curling up. And they could barely walk, and they were having a hard time moving around. And so I looked over, and underneath the tent, there was about 20 horses, and they were all tied up with a halter, and they had chains coming from each side of the halter, and they were chained to a long wire going along the line, like a chain of bikes. And behind them was about 12 elephants. And they were chained by one front and one back leg, and they were rocking, and they were swaying, and they were bobbing their heads up and down. To the side of them were tigers. And they were in cages just barely big enough to be in. And they were anxiously trying to pace side to side from the cage. And they were repeatedly turning around in the cage. I couldn't believe it was legal, that you could put an animal in this position where it was so distressing, so far removed from their natural state, that it was literally driving them crazy. At the time, I was watching a lot of nature shows, and I was struck by how beautiful these animals were and how beautiful their natural lives were. And when I saw them treated with such disdain, as if their lives didn't matter, I felt deep sadness. There were other people standing around looking at these animals, and they were commenting about how the elephants were dancing, how the tigers looked fierce, but not one of them mentioned how distressing it was for these animals. Circuses like this had been around for over 100 years. And standing there, I realized that in that 100 years, they had successfully conditioned us, desensitized us to look at animals in this context and to think it was normal. So I realized that the animal rights movement, including myself, was going to have to educate our society and people in it to show them, to teach them that this was not normal. It was cruelty, it was degrading, and it was unacceptable. So I began organizing educational protest and video recording the treatment of animals at circuses. And at first only a small number of people came out, and sometimes it was just 2 of us. However, despite our small numbers, I knew deep down 2 things. First, I knew that compassion was a powerful thing. It is a powerful thing. And that it's unstoppable. Second one, I knew that if we were relentless, and that if we believed that every circus show, every patron going into that circus got an opportunity to get a flyer, I knew that in my lifetime I would witness the day that there would be no more use of animals in circuses. After a few years of perseverance, our efforts paid off. People started coming out, attending our protests more often, and we saw the numbers of animals, saw the numbers of patrons at the circus drop, till eventually some circuses, the smaller circuses, disappeared, and circuses like Circus Vargas stopped using animals altogether. Despite when we'd stand out there, we were ridiculed, we were yelled at, we were physically attacked at times, and we were arrested for doing what we did, for advocating for the animals. Despite all that, more and more we were told by patrons coming out of the shows that they didn't like the animal acts and that they were never going to turn circuses again. So we saw the change happening. Even then we saw the small changes happening. And then on March 5th, just a little less than 3 months ago, at 6:30 a.m., I was awoken by the monumental news, and this is huge, folks, that Ringling Brothers Circus announced in 2018 they were no longer going to use elephants in their circuses. And that's huge. And that announcement came despite Ringling, up to that moment, telling the media and telling the public that they would never, ever get rid of the elephants, because the elephants were the iconic symbol for over 100 years. So when corporations are telling the media that they'll never do something, don't you believe it? Because we all know they lie about what they do to the animals, and they lie about what they're going to do. And when they say they'll never do it, they're going to do it. I guarantee you they're going to do it. As long as we're relentless, they're going to do it. The decision by Ringling was a result of a decades-long campaign to educate the public about animals in circuses, and Ringling acknowledged this. They said that their decision was based on a growing public concern about how they treat their animals. And based on this growing public concern, 1 year ago, the city of Los Angeles banned the bullhook. For those of you who don't know what a bullhook is, it's this instrument right here. It's a weapon, looks a bit like a fireplace poker. People who use elephants use this to beat them. They jab them with it, they hook them with it. This is how they control an elephant. And 1 year ago, Los Angeles, the second largest city in the United States, banned the use of the bullhook. In December, in an effort spearheaded by my beautiful wife, Denise Boble, and myself, the city of Oakland banned the bullhook as well. 20 years ago, banning the bullhook would have been impossible. Impossible. In fact, in the media would show them using the bullhook, and they would say, oh, they poked and prodded the elephants, and it was acceptable. I remember talking to the media, and the lady could hardly contain her laughter, hardly contain herself from laughing at me when I was telling her how cruel it was to treat the animals in the circus. But today, after they announced their bullhook ban, the media came out, and no one was laughing. In fact, everybody understood it. And the reason they understood it was because of those 20 to 30 years of education, telling people that this is wrong, this is not normal, and it's unacceptable. And educating the public results in educating public officials, which results in laws protecting animals from abuse. That's the power of education, folks, and that's what we need to continue. Now there is a bill in California to ban bullhooks throughout the whole state, and it's probably going to pass because it's got a lot of support. San Francisco, just a month ago, banned the use of animals, exotic animals, in performances. Wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. Bolivia, Singapore, Paraguay, Costa Rica, Bosnia, Slovenia, Cyprus, India, Peru, Austria, Sweden, Finland, the Netherlands, and Mexico have all banned animal acts in circuses in some form. It's happening all around the world, folks, not just in the United States. Everybody around the world is getting it. Recently, India declared dolphins non-human persons with rights. A court in Argentina recently found that Sandra, an orangutan held at a zoo, was declared her a person with certain rights. More and more we hear about cow farmers, pig farmers, sheep farmers, dairy farmers giving up their business because they no longer want to hurt animals. The documentary Blackfish, which you've all heard of about SeaWorld, about the treatment and the effects of captivity on orcas, is bringing down SeaWorld. And it's bringing down SeaWorld because it's bringing down SeaWorld's attendance. And it's bringing down SeaWorld's attendance because it is educating people who would attend SeaWorld. And they are getting educated and they're saying, we don't want to support that. And that's the power of education. Based on educational efforts of the animal rights movement, people are more and more seeing other animals as living, feeling, loving beings who deserve to be treated with respect. Accordingly, people are more and more sickened by videos exposing the abuse of animals in industries that know their continued existence is reliant on hiding their abuse, because exposure results in people caring. Animal rights is an idea whose time has come. It is a force that cannot be stopped. Its adoption by our society is inevitable, and the corporations know it. That's why they fight so hard against it. It's inevitable, folks. Now each generation is growing up with animal rights in their consciousness. When I was a kid, nobody ever talked about animal rights. Now it's in the social conscious. Each generation is growing up with it. It's easier for each new generation to understand animal rights philosophy and to adopt it. Because of these efforts, the educational efforts, the foundation of our society's indifference and apathy towards other animals is crumbling. And that crumbling is a result of education. As long as we are relentless in our educational efforts, it will continue to crumble. And as long as we speak up and let people know that it is not acceptable to commit or support cruelty, the day will come when all forms of animal exploitation and abuse are no longer acceptable in our society. We can change things, folks, if we choose to, because you and I have a choice. We can choose to advocate for animals, or we can choose to ignore their suffering and pain and their deaths. But the animals don't have a choice. They can't quit. They can't quit being an egg machine. They can't quit being a dairy machine. They can't quit being a milk machine. They can't quit being a meat machine, a fur machine, a puppy machine. They can't quit being a circus prop or a research tool or a slave. They can't quit suffering, and they can't quit being killed. That is why we need to choose to fight like hell for them and never, ever give up. Because when we are fighting these battles, something has to give. And as long as we don't give, it will be the animal abuse organizations that give, the corporations. That you all are here today is evidence that the animals' cries and screams have been heard. And I guarantee you, as long as we are relentless in our educational efforts, they shall be free one day. Thank you very much.